You mean either the either or the either. I told you we're out of Phoenix Down. Okay, all right.
Hi, you're listening to MageCast, the ensemble podcast by the well-read mage and a cast of mages. Each episode, I sit down with my rotating panel of guests to have some civil discourse about a single game. We're a group of games writers dedicated to long-form content and critique. You can find us on WordPress at thewellreadmage.com, on Twitter at thewellreadmage, and on YouTube. Crowdfunding support makes projects like MageCast possible. If you enjoy our work, written or otherwise, you can check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/thewellreadmage for more information on exclusives, rewards, and our vision for a future of better games writing and a friendlier gaming community. Links are in the description. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share MageCast with your fellow adventurers. Leave us a review, too. Oh, and now let's start the show. Good morning. Welcome to the very first episode of MageCast of 2019. I have to be very careful about saying 19 and not 18. I've been screwing that up for like a week now. 5 days. But I'm today sitting down with two fine gentlemen that I've never met before, except for like 10 minutes ago. And they've been very patient with me trying to get all the stupid hardware preferences set up. So I already like them. So I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves, talk about what's your shtick? Like what are some of your favorite games? What's your podcast about? And what are you playing right now, if you would? I don't know who wants to go first. We'll start with Steven.
Oh, okay. My name's Steve, and I guess my shtick to start there, I'm a massive gamer. I'm a writer for kinggamer.com. We do a lot of like editorial pieces, news stuff, reviews. We have a podcast called The Pixel Meditations, and Toby can expand upon it a little bit if I miss something, but we sort of want to talk about video games as an art form and as a serious medium. Our goal is to kind of like bring video games into the forefront as something that should be taken seriously, kind of like film or literature. So that's kind of our thing. We do many different topics. Could be a single game company, could be a console, could be a concept like emulators, could be anything. Whatever kind of piques our interest and whatever guests kind of want to talk about. And what am I playing right now? I've been playing Donkey Kong Country again to talk about this episode.
Yes, awesome.
And I couldn't help but play the second one again because I absolutely love the second one. It's one of my favorite platformers of all time. And outside of that, I've been playing the Banner Saga, actually. The Banner Saga, which I finally picked up on the Switch. I'm a massive RPG and platform nerd, so that's sort of my gaming background.
Nice. And playing a massive RPG in bed on the Switch is
it's pretty amazing.
It's
a great experience.
Like I've been playing Final Fantasy V. I hacked it onto my Super Nintendo Classic, and I'm like, why can't I play this in bed? That would be so awesome if it was on the Switch. But yeah.
You gotta bust out that old Game Boy Advance with Final Fantasy V Advanced on there.
If I had it, or if my hands could fit around a tiny handheld. I mean, look at the size of these things. They're like 6 feet wide. Yeah, I have giant hands, so handhelds are out of the question. All right, and then our second guest here is Toby. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Hey, so I'm Toby. Me and Steve co-host Pixel Meditations, so I think he pretty much got everything how I would describe it. So we kind of just like to think about video games as kind of like more than just like quick fun. Like there's a lot of depth in video games, and the developers spend a lot of time in them. And I think just on like a cultural level, there's a lot of significance there. And I think we kind of just like to bring out a little bit of a deeper side of kind of like our feelings and thoughts about video games. So, I mean, I play a lot of different games, although my time to play them has somewhat diminished. I'm a grad student over here in Germany, so it's hard to have time to play all the games. But I've been playing Donkey Kong Country as well today. I have also been playing Celeste.
Oh, nice.
Which is just a wonderful platformer. I really love that game. I mean, compared to Donkey Kong Country, oh my God, it's so hard.
Yeah, well, you've had like decades of practice on Donkey Kong Country, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
I have not played Celeste, but I thought it was so cool that Celeste was nominated for Game of the Year. To see an indie up there next to, RDR2 and God of War.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it just absolutely deserves that spot. It's such a great game. It just takes the best of a lot of different platformers and puts it together in a really unique, awesome way. So yeah, totally. So I've just been playing a few games here and there when I get a chance, but I'll always keep playing some games as long as I can.
Yeah. Now, Steven, I saw you were about to say something. You took a breath. What did you want to say, sir?
I was just going to echo that Celeste is totally deserving of being a 2018 Game of the Year nominee. It's such a great game in every way. The story is just so well weaving into it. The gameplay, it just has amazing platforming elements. Every level is completely different, even though it's all on the same mountain. Just absolutely A-class platformer. Everyone should play it.
Yeah. Now, see, I haven't
totally.
played it yet. I really want to, though. So I'm going to definitely snag on that. Now, something I wanted to touch on. I really like the concept for you guys' podcast. I really like the goal, the theme that you guys have to sort of make video games a little more of you could say, I guess, accepted art form, right? But treated as an art form like literature, like sort of the classical forms of art, right? And I wanted to ask you guys, pick your brains on this. What do you think are some things, maybe 2-3 things that need to happen in order for that to become a reality, in order for games to be seen as an art form, not necessarily just by the mainstream, but maybe by players themselves? I know that's a huge question, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it is absolutely a huge question, and we've addressed this in several of our episodes. So if you guys are interested, you can check it out on our podcast. But I think generally, a lot of people have to play the game, so I think that's kind of a big thing. So growing up, I feel like kids were more on the outskirts. Games were more on the outskirts, and not as many people played them. So I feel like there has to be a general appeal to the games, and I feel like as we're aging, millennials get older, we're not going to stop playing games. We're going to keep playing games, our whole lives. So I feel like we're kind of leading the charge to bringing games to a wider audience. And I feel like just having games that treat subjects seriously and don't kind of pander to childish notions. I've been playing through Detroit Become Human, and I feel like that game is a perfect example of something that addresses serious topics, and it's really interesting. It's not just childish fun. It's really cool. It's really interesting. It's kind of like a novel in its own way, but in a unique way. And I don't know, video games are just kind of new, so it takes a bit of time to kind of get accepted as on the same level as music or movies or something like that.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's a good point. I think that the more time goes on, we'll start introducing the next generation to games, and it'll become sort of an accepted thing there. I've already got my 3-year-old on the original Legend of Zelda, and he's plowing through Octoroks and stuff like that. There's no way he's gonna beat it because I couldn't beat it when I was a kid. But to get the familiarity with interactive media in early, I think is good. And then, like you touched on, making games more accessible to people. And the great thing about today is we have this wide variety of games. You've got, Detroit, like you mentioned, and then you've got Super Mario Party that just came out. 2 completely different styles of games. And yet you could have sort of a college-age intellectual that's into Detroit. And at the same time, on Thanksgiving, I played Super Mario Party with my in-laws who, haven't touched a controller maybe in their entire lives. So having that level of accessibility and variety and choice available is great, I think. What about you, Stephen? What do you think?
I definitely agree with everything you guys have said, but I would also add just education about video games. And I don't mean that not everyone has to learn about a specific kind of art, but people have to see that there is something to learn from video games, whether that's someone getting involved with the process of coding or someone picking up like you say Minecraft like Education Edition, which is like Minecraft to like teach kids how to use basic coding and like, learn tech skills. And I would also say people can get involved with like the musical side, making music for games, writing for games. And I think that people need to understand that there's a lot of moving parts with games. It's not just something that someone threw together. And since now we have so many more people playing games and it has matured a bit, I think this is happening. There's still obviously going to be a lot of opposition to video games, especially, you know, like all this Red Dead Redemption 2 controversy happening with like all the stuff you can do in that game, like, you know, killing the lady that's like a women's rights activist.
Well, these days it seems like anytime any big game comes out, there's a controversy of some kind. But yeah, now I get what you mean.
But I think like in the end of the day, every single art form basically struggled when it first started. You know, I don't think that even literature or movies, when this stuff was, when different ways of literature came out, you know, like Renaissance period or whatever, there's always backlash to stuff, and there's always going to be backlash until it becomes kind of ingrained and accepted into society. And I think it's a matter of time. I think it's already changing right now for the better. And you're seeing there's so many more people involved with every process of video games, not just playing, making podcasts, writing about it, you know, like it's grown so much. It's grown so much since even just when I was a kid and before basically the internet took off.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I was thinking actually of Ragtime. Ragtime, when it first kind of came out on the scene, was sort of seen as like this trashy kind of low art music. And now you've got people studying ragtime, and you've got people appreciating ragtime. You've got people using it in movies and games to highlight certain emotions and themes and feelings. So I think that that's an example of a recent kind of art. Same thing perhaps with comic books. Comic books are an American art form, and you know, when they debuted, they were kind of just like things that little kids would read, and you'd buy them for 5 cents and things like that. Now, dude, I was watching a documentary, and you've got comic book historians now. So like,
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's like, what? Like, imagine, you know, like 60, 70 years ago, you wouldn't dream of having a historian dedicated to this pulp fiction stuff, you know, like the magazines that are just rubbish. But today, things have really evolved. So I'm sure the time is coming for games. You guys keep fighting the good fight. But today we're going to talk about a beloved classic, an iconic classic, Donkey Kong Country. Title of the episode is Banana Hammock. I'm just kidding. Actually, it's not Banana Hammock. It's we were trying to decide on a name, me and our group of writers, and it's definitely not that. It's Great Apespectations. It took us a while to come up with that.
Oh,
but yeah.
Nice Charles Dickens knockoff.
Yes. What the Dickens? So this game came out in 1994 on the good old Super Nintendo, developed by Rare, published by Nintendo. What is, though, so special about Donkey Kong Country? So when we talk about this game, there were so many platformers in that era. The platformer was kind of the dominant genre in the late 80s, early 90s, I'd say. But what makes this game stand out? What are some things about it that pop into your head?
Well, for me, I mean, I think just the whole package together. Like you play this game, you pop it in, you load it up, and you're immediately encountered by like just wonderful, like this music by David Wise. Like that's such a great addition to the game. I really can't. I mean, just the feeling that the soundtrack gives you is so cool. And then also, I think just the graphics and how you're playing the Super Nintendo, but it's like they have these like crazy like computer animated 3D graphics, and I think that was so cool and revolutionary at the time. Certainly when I first got this game and played it, that was like something that really struck me, and I think it struck a lot of people when they played that game back in 1994 and beyond. But I just think like the solid platforming, like the different levels, like it felt varied and fun, and like they put a lot of thought and love into the game. I think that's really, for me, like what made it such an incredible game, and I think still makes it an incredible game today compared to other platformers that have come out.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. What about you, Steven?
Now, I think there's so many things you could touch upon on why this game is so near and dear to so many gamers' hearts. When it came out, I think it was just absolutely revolutionary with the graphics, all the pre-rendered stuff they did.
Yeah.
You see the barrels, they pop out, the characters pop out, and just like the layers of the levels. The levels themselves, they have like different layers in the background. It kind of like, as a kid, now you might not think it looks so great. It doesn't maybe hold up to time so well, but back then it looked like there's like a whole rainforest behind you, and the colors were so vibrant. And I had read somewhere they were trying to cram like 256 colors into a SNES cart, which only could use, I think, 16 colors. And considering that limitation, it's such a beautiful and vibrant game. And the atmospheres just pop out. And they did so much stuff with like weather effects, like night and day effects. And I think the presentation of the game was just something that was basically not really seen on a console up to that point.
Yeah.
At least not done in that way.
Yeah, so with the pre-rendered graphics, Donkey Kong Country, I guess, was one of the first games on a mainstream home video game console to use pre-rendered 3D graphics. And this is something we'd later see in the PlayStation era, where we'd had the pre-rendered backgrounds, right? But to see that on the Super Nintendo is pretty mind-blowing. And when you're talking about all those colors, I didn't know that little factoid. But there are so many sort of gradients of color and layers of mist, snow, the changing weather effects, things like that, that make this game look extremely atmospheric. Question, though, do you think that this style of visuals has aged well compared to, say, some of the crisper games on the Super Nintendo that are comparable, like Super Mario World, Super Metroid?
Yeah, I mean...
Sorry, we're going to do this the whole time. Why don't we take turns?
We probably
we'll
will.
take turns, so we'll have Steve go this time, and then Toby, you can follow up.
Okay, that sounds fine.
When I was replaying this game, I had very fond memories of just how beautiful the game was as a kid. And I think the pre-rendered graphics, as far as the character sprites go, and the barrels and the trees in the forefront look really great still. It looks like an absolutely beautiful game. I don't think that the backgrounds, like in terms of like the sky and the clouds and the mountains in the background, hold up very well. It's kind of blurry looking now. It's a little bit ugly. But I certainly think the game, considering the time period and everything, I do think it holds up well, but maybe not so much next to a game like Kirby's Dream Land 3 or Kirby Superstar, something that's just, they had that fancy FX chip inside of it, and they got to get more power out of it. Even like Yoshi's Island is probably a much more beautiful game by modern standards. So comparatively, maybe not so much, but it's still certainly playable. I wouldn't say the visuals make it unplayable.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Toby?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Steve said. I think the overworld is kind of like really not the best.
No, you're talking about, for the sake of non-gamers listening, the overworld, the hub between levels, right? Where you'd have to march down that path.
Yeah. Like that is definitely not up to snuff. Like that would totally be changed. Like it looks totally pixelated and not good. But I think the levels are just wonderful. I don't know if I mean, I see the whole game through the lens of nostalgia, so it's really hard to say objectively. Like, if this game came out, like, fresh and I had no idea today, I might think about it differently. But, I mean, at the time, I think it was just so groundbreaking and incredible. It's hard for me to really, like, look at that game in any other way.
Yeah, and part of that undoubtedly was Rare's campaign that they put out for this game. Do you guys remember that? How old are you? I'm 33.
Yeah, I'm 31.
Okay, I'm 30.
Okay, so you guys, you're around the same age. Do you guys remember seeing in the magazines like those 3D renders of Donkey Kong?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And being like, "What this game is in 3D?" Like I bought
Nintendo Power? Or?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
I bought
Power.
it expecting Donkey Kong to like jump out of the screen like an actual like 3D thing, but still, I mean, so slightly more disappointing than that, but. It was still 3D though. It was like 2.5D. But as a kid, you seeing like, especially compared to the flatness of Mario or something like that, seeing the fluidity of these character animations that were so rounded and so full of personality was really incredible. And Rare definitely pumped that up with their campaign. It was incredible stuff. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I completely agree. And though Nintendo definitely like the way they presented some of their games in like Nintendo Power, and even like the box art is just like it can never match up to that stuff. But I feel like they did this all throughout the '90s, like kind of just making it seem like it would just be perfect 3D, and then you play it and it's a little less than that.
Right. Well, yeah, the box art has friggin' the characters like running out over the black frame, right, of the Super Nintendo cover, and you're like, is that what's gonna happen to my TV? You know, and yeah, it doesn't exactly happen that way.
No. You know, at least it's not. Wow, I can't talk here. At least it's not Sonic 3D Blast or something where it's supposed to be 3D. Then you get some really pixelated isometric game that's such a letdown.
See, I haven't played that. I've played one Sonic game in my entire life. I was a Nintendo guy growing up, so.
Yeah, I was Nintendo as well.
And were you the Sega guy then, Steven?
No, I was a Nintendo guy, but actually I had two really good friends that had like Genesises, and they really talked them up. So I got to play a lot of the Genesis games, even though I was a Nintendo kid myself.
Oh, see, that's cool. You got a little taste of both then.
So I got the Mortal Kombat 2, yeah.
Oh,
Sonic.
the bloody one, yes.
Yeah. Super Nintendo one had no blood.
Yeah, I've got the first Mortal Kombat on Super Nintendo still. And I didn't think about it when I was a kid. I was just like, yeah, you punch somebody, of course sweat pops out of their face. You play it now, and you're like, this is kind of ridiculous. So there's a question here. This is from the sometimes vaguely philosophical Mage, Chris, one of our writers. He says, I have a Super Nintendo Classic, and my other half and I have played through Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island on it, both great games, but tried Donkey Kong Country and just didn't get it. To me, it doesn't feel the same as those other platformers, and I can't put my finger on why. Am I missing some innovation that's making it different, and I'm just not recognizing that? Or is it something that does in fact take adjusting to, especially, I guess, if you're used to different or more modern trappings? So that's a lot of what we've been talking about, but I kind of want to use that to bridge into the uniqueness of DKC, especially in terms of the other big Super Nintendo platformers. Like he mentioned Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, Super Metroid, games like that. So one thing for me to kind of kick this off that's really big in Donkey Kong Country is a sense of weight. It felt really like, and I hate using the word feel when you talk about games. Sometimes that's like it's a weird term. So we'll say seem. It seemed like Donkey Kong had a real sense of being present on the screen because they nailed the height of his jump, the pace that he could run at. And there was a difference then too between Donkey Kong, and this game has a second character that we all know called Diddy Kong, his nephew, right? So you had Diddy Kong was this fast-paced character, much lighter seeming, could jump further and so on. And then you had Donkey Kong that was much heavier. I don't know how they achieved that, but that's at least one thing that kind of stands out to my mind with Donkey Kong Country compared to the other Nintendo platformers. But what about you guys? What are some differences there?
I would agree with the weight thing. That's really interesting. I think it's really cool how there's two characters that are interchangeable, and they all have like slightly different kind of feels to how they play. It's a little bit better than like Mario and Luigi, who basically play almost identically. Yes. I mean, I think identically.
Yeah, well, definitely pretty much all of the first Super Mario Brothers, they were identical, right? And then Super Mario Brothers 3, they're identical. But in 2, you had all the 2's the black sheep anyway, so. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But even Mario World, I think they played the same too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the pace of Donkey Kong Country is like quite fast. Like I just played through it, and literally in like 30 minutes, I finished the first stage.
Yeah.
Like the levels are kind of short and fast. You kind of move around. We were talking earlier, and what really interesting and fun thing about the game is there's kind of like this like pacing with the different things, different platforming things that you're doing, like the barrels, like how you can just kind of like shoot through the barrels if you understand this like rhythm or timing in the and it's just hard to find platformers that have like that kind of feeling where you feel like you're kind of like connected to the game in this like rhythmic sort of way.
Yeah.
And it's just like they achieved it so well in it, and it just feels really cool, especially for the barrel parts of the game.
It's not really like, say, a Mega Man game. You kind of approach by thinking ahead of the jumps. Where do I position myself? Especially classic Mega Man. Lining yourself up to shoot down enemies and that sort of thing. But in Donkey Kong Country, they gave you that roll that could kind of get you running, and so you could get a good pace up quite quickly. And it seemed like you could really just breeze through levels, especially if you knew what was coming.
Yeah, it's almost like a musical. It's like a musical piece as you're playing. You're like jumping on enemies' heads, and they all make a different sound. You swing across the rope, jump into a barrel. It really is like Rare set up the game so well. Like they made these levels so you can intentionally kind of cheese the levels if you know how to get through them. Like you can kind of run through it without stopping, basically.
Yeah. Now I'm not anywhere near that good. I played this game last year, and darn it, I can't get past that Minecraft. The minecart. I almost said Minecraft. The minecart level.
Yeah, the minecart level. I beat that literally like an hour ago. It's kind of
nice. I had to have.
See, the thing is,
no, go ahead.
I died like 5 times.
I've just played Donkey Kong Country way too much. All 3 of them. I've probably beaten Donkey Kong Country at least 20 or 30 times.
Oh man,
like so for me, it's like it was one of my go-to games. It's one of the very first games I ever played as a kid. It's basically that and Mario were the 2 games that got me into video games in the first place. So
nice.
For me, it was just like it's an insanely special game that I've spent way too much time with. So I feel like I've kind of have memorized most of the levels and where stuff is.
I would say so, because I beat this game for the first time last year. Because as a kid, I could not get past that minecart level. This time around, I had to have my kid brother do it for me. And he's like 15 years younger than me, so he's not like kid. But he did it, and I was like, man, thank you. Because now I can finally face K. Rool. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Honestly, so I just played that level like literally an hour ago, and I have to say it's like they nailed the Kong platforming levels with the barrels and everything like so well. But I do feel like that might be like it's really fun. It's like my fun and like my kind of like my most favorite and my least favorite part of like that game. Like it's so cool, but at the same time, I feel like there's something a little bit off about how the minecart jumps, and I feel like I'm always jumping into stuff, like I'm doing things unintentionally, and it's like it's harder than it should be, I guess.
Well, I think what you're looking at with the minecart levels is the equivalent of like the underwater level, right? Because that changes up the physics of the game. So we've been sort of tutorialized by the opening levels of Donkey Kong Country to understand the pace and how the characters run and how they feel, but then you hit a minecart level and you're like, this is not exactly the same thing. So it takes a little while to get used to now this new sense of physics, right?
Yeah,
it's like a totally different feeling. Yeah.
And you nailed it, because you were talking about how Donkey Kong feels weighted. And the minecart, it definitely feels weighted too. It doesn't jump as far as Diddy Kong would jump in the level. It doesn't seem like it. So your jump is more limited. And Rare intentionally put these crazy jumps where you have to basically jump at exactly the right time. It's all timing. And it doesn't have the fluidity of like, say Mario or even Diddy Kong when you're running in the levels. It feels like the cart's weighted down. Yeah. And I think that's intentional.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of mind-boggling how early in the game they put the minecart levels, right? Like you could see like that being like an end game thing, but it's almost like they were saying, look, if you're going to make it through this game, I think this game is pretty hard personally, especially with minecart levels, but it's almost like they put that there to say, if you can't get past this, you're not getting to the rest of this game. Okay, dude? So, I mean, like some of the Blizzard stages are really hard. Were really hard for me to get through.
Yeah.
You kind of got to use that trick where you roll off the edge of a cliff and then jump. Like this really weird mechanic, but it gives you, that much further of a distance that you can go. So yeah, I think the minecart stages almost serve as a kind of guard to the latter levels of this game.
That's funny.
Yeah,
'cause
that's,
I
that's
forget,
really interesting.
because the first minecart level's in the second world, or the second area, whatever you want to call it. And there's a later one. There's a couple of later stages. I think there's 3 minecart levels.
Oh gosh, there's that one where the skeleton ghost chases you, right? Is that this game?
I think that's part 2.
Oh, no.
I think it's Diddy Kong's quest.
Okay.
Where you have like you're riding on the it's not a cart, it's like a skeleton
Roller
head
coaster,
thingamajig.
yeah, or
There's not
something
really
like
a name for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting them confused. But yeah, the minecart levels can go stub their toe on a steam roller.
Oh my god, it's so hard.
They're very hard. So I know what we want. Another thing we wanted to touch on was Diddy Kong and Donkey Kong and this kind of immediacy to the co-op. So we talked already about how the 2 different characters handle, but one of the unique things about this game is how it allows the 2 different players to play. If one of you guys wants to break that down.
Yeah, sure, I can kind of do that. So Diddy Kong and Donkey Kong both have different abilities. We've already talked about a little bit of it with speed. Like Donkey Kong's obviously slow or he's heavier, but he also comes with a ground pound, which is pretty useless. I don't know if you guys ever used the ground pound.
I didn't.
I've never
No.
used
Yeah, no,
it.
not really. No.
But he can basically, there's certain enemies like that he can jump on that Diddy can't. Like some of those really big, strong Kremlins that are really muscly. Like Donkey Kong can jump right on them, whereas if Diddy Kong jumps on them, he just bounces off because he's too small to take him out.
Yes, and I love that. I love that they gave them each sort of a strength and weakness. So Diddy Kong's much more agile, but he can't take down certain enemies just by jumping on them.
And there's an evil part in the game. It's later in the game. I think it's in the Creme Inc. section where you're riding on this platform. It's like a rail platform. And you can't move off the platform. And you can't tag each other out in the platform either. So whatever Kong you have, you're stuck with. So like I had Diddy, and this big muscly like Kremlin jumps onto the platform with you, and it's tiny. So I'm like, oh my god, what do I do? So the only way you can kill it with Diddy Kong is if you use his cartwheel. You had to cartwheel into the enemy, but not cartwheel far enough where you'll fling yourself off the tiny platform you're stuck on too. Maybe if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that is evil. That's horrifying game design. Now, you could, if you're playing this game one player, you could switch between the 2 characters, right? By pressing select, I believe it was, right?
You're not allowed to on the platform.
Oh,
that
right.
that one part.
And you can't do
But
it in
usually you
midair,
can.
right? You have to be standing. I don't know if you could do it in midair now.
I don't think so.
We'll have to verify
Pretty
that
sure
at a
you
later
can.
date. But yeah, I wouldn't think that you could switch them in midair. I'm thinking you can't, because that would be a little game breaking. It seems like, because then it's like,
Yeah, especially
Yeah, I
in
don't
part
think you can.
2 where you have like Dixie who can fly.
yeah,
That'd be almost
yeah,
like
that's true. But with 2 players though, you could assign either player to play as Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong. One of the questions that we got was from Writer's View on Twitter. Do you prefer Donkey or Diddy? Which one was your guys' preference?
I think I prefer Donkey Kong. I'm not really sure why. I think I just enjoyed that he's just like more powerful or something. Like, I don't know. He's just the quintessential Donkey Kong. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like Diddy Kong's always cartwheeling around or something. like
doing his gymnastics in the jungle.
yeah, I want the like power guy.
Yeah, he felt like a tank, even though he could only take 1 hit. It's kind of a weird. I guess I'd say that's an achievement for game design, where they could make your character feel like he's this juggernaut of a unstoppable character, but you can still only take 1 hit, and then you're toast, right? What about you,
true.
Steven? What's your preference between the 2?
I'm a Diddy Kong guy. I like Diddy. I
controversy.
like Donkey, but I'm all
You
Diddy
would be.
because the thing is Diddy can jump on all those trees. He can do the further jump. So I usually almost always have Diddy out unless I know like for sure I need Donkey Kong for something. I like Diddy's speed. I like cartwheeling through a bunch of enemies. You can like take out like 4 different Kremlins in like 1 cartwheel.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. Okay, tiebreaker here. I prefer Diddy Kong as well. Sorry, but yeah, I like the speed that he could move at. I always felt after playing Diddy for a while and then dying and then having to play as Donkey Kong, they were like, "Oh, this guy's so slow." But it was super cool how he did feel unstoppable because they're like huge. What were they called? Kremlins? You guys are the experts.
Kremlins, yeah.
Which is kind of that's a weird reference for a Nintendo game to make Kremlins. But anyways, the huge ones would walk by, right? And then you're just like, with Donkey Kong, paperweights. But the immediacy that this game has with its 2-player co-op is, I think, something that's really valuable. Still, there are a lot of co-op games where you can either play simultaneously or you play by taking turns. And taking turns in terms of interchanging lives. So, you know, in a Mario game, when classically your character would die, then, you know, the next player would go. But in this game, instead of starting over from the beginning of the level, if you have both characters and one of the characters dies and you're playing 2-player, the other person starts right then and there, and that's midair, right? I remember you get hit by like a bee in the middle of the air, then the other person better be ready because they're going to start their turn right there and they have to figure that out. You know, so that sense of immediacy with the co-op is something that I think really makes Donkey Kong Country stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I feel like having 2 people play it together, like, you both have to be pretty engaged because, like, maybe you're gonna die at some point, or your opponent's, or your teammate or whatever, your friend's gonna die, and then you gotta like switch out, and so like you're both playing it together, even though it's co-op. You know, I think they did a really good job. It's really unique. I haven't seen that in too many other games.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I got to say, this is absolutely brilliant on Rare's part because, like you said with Mario, it's so frustrating when you know you're just going to watch someone play like a 4-minute level and you're just sitting there. And I've heard some people actually bash the Donkey Kong tag system because they say it's also slow. It's like, well, why can't you have 2 players playing the Kongs together? And
simultaneously?
Yeah, 2 guys running around.
I don't buy that in the least.
Well, you know, the new ones like Donkey Kong Returns and Tropical Freeze, you can do it.
Right, but you had a wider
it's
screen
messy
today, right?
That's true too, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking in terms of Super Nintendo games where the co-op is simultaneous. So I think of Zombies Ate My Neighbors is one of my favorite co-op games on the Super Nintendo. You guys share the same screen, but the screen is tiny. And so it's like if one guy's like, well, I'm going south, and the other guy's, well, I'm going north, then you have the typical, you both get stuck. And so I just don't think in a fast-paced platformer at that era with that size of screen that it would work. But you were talking about the newer Donkey Kong Country games, which I haven't played. So go ahead and elaborate on that.
Well, first of all, Retro Studios did a pretty good job with those games. They're really good. If you like the old ones, you'll still like them, even though they're a bit different. But yeah, like I played Tropical Freeze with my friend, and we're both on the same screen. But you can tell that the game is designed more for like the 1-player experience. It really does feel like the levels fit better if you're just playing it by yourself and you use the secondary Kongs to give you extra abilities.
Okay.
With 2 people, it's kind of like just chaos. You're both running around. Someone's always dying or getting hit by something, and it doesn't really add anything to the game.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt like Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 for the Super Nintendo, there was a lot of reasons to tag someone in and out, and a lot of like, especially number 2 and 3, like Rare made it even more important to tag for specific reasons.
Right.
But even in the original Donkey Kong Country, I still think it fits the game style much better because, you don't have 2 people awkwardly running around or the second player falling off the screen and getting sucked back to the first player like you would, and like Kirby, I think, does that. But I think that Rare intentionally designed the game to make it more playable for 2 players and a lot of fun and rewarding. But they gave it a purpose. So like, oh, you're Diddy. Like maybe you can do this part easier. You can jump up to that tree, or you can get to that barrel. Like I'm going to tag you in. Or hey, there's some like tough Kremlins up ahead. I'm going to tag you in because you're Donkey Kong. So I think Rare they did a really good job planning that out.
Yeah, no, I definitely I would agree with that. I think that that happened quite frequently when I played this game last year with my brother, where I was like, I don't think this area is going to be my specialty. Like he was really good with the mine carts, but I was really good with the cannon barrels, like in the timing there. So anytime we saw that there was a different kind of section coming up, something that either fit his specific strengths as a person or the strengths of the character he was playing as, we could tag team in and out. A game that I'm thinking of when you're talking about simultaneous co-op is New Super Mario Brothers Wii. Did you guys play any games from that series?
Oh yeah, I did play the first one.
Okay, that's the one that I've played too. How about you, Steven?
I don't think I played that one. No.
Okay,
That's for Wii or Wii U?
I think it's Wii. Well, I don't have a Wii U, so it's
The
Wii.
first one's for the Wii for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
No, I didn't play
that one has some extremely awkward co-op. You could have 4 players simultaneous on a platformer, a Mario-style platformer, but they made it so that your characters are kind of like bumper cars. So if you jumped on another character's head, it would push that character down, which obviously would suck in midair over a pit, but it would kind of launch your character further. Or if you bumped into each other, they kind of created like this elasticity to the characters almost, rather than occupying the same space, which it was a fun game, but I was like, I never want to play a co-op like this ever again.
Yeah, and I think like to some extent co-op is necessary in that game, right?
Yeah,
like
there's some things you can't
like-
reach without co-op and stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, like I found that game, like playing it by myself, to be really hard.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually didn't beat that game.
It's awkward, right? Because it's like you kind of need other people with you, but then at the same time, when they screw up your jump, or is it like like my wife and I, when we were playing that game, we just kept bumping into each other, pushing each other off of platforms and stuff, and I was like, this sucks. But they had a different way to kind of compensate with that, so it's not like if you fell off, like you wouldn't die. You would come back in like the Yoshi's Island bubble, and then like the other players can pop the bubble and you come right back. So I think you only lose if all of the characters that are currently playing fall or get hit or something like that. But yeah, it's still kind of a stressful game design. So I think that with Donkey Kong Country, I think that they hit a really great balance with that tag team. I think it's perfect for the scale of the levels and the rate that you can play them at. Again, because we were talking about pace. Imagine 2 people keeping up with the same pace. That'd be pretty hard, I think. I want to get into... I ran a poll on Twitter that got 277 votes. It was asking, which is your preferred game of the Donkey Kong Country Super Nintendo trilogy? So did you guys see that before I'm gonna quiz you on it?
I did, yeah. Usually I'm the guy on Twitter, so I saw that post. I saw you put that poll up a few days ago. And 2 and 1 were tied. No,
they were okay. So they were for like a while, like at like 150 something votes. They're both at like 45% each. But now, which one do you think won? Which one do you think is the preferred game?
Donkey Kong Country 2.
See, that's what I thought it was going to be. But it was actually the third game. No, I'm just kidding. It was They're like, what? Spit out your coffee. No, it was the first game. The first game won at 48% out of 277 votes. Second game, 43%. Third game, 9%. So yeah, that's kind of
poor Donkey Kong Country 3. I love 3, even though it's kind of the black sheep.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever beaten 3. Someday, but my preference is actually for the second game. I think it's very refined. I think the amount of detail that went into the level design, you could move in not just horizontal fashion, but vertical fashion, much more secret rooms, that sort of thing. So my preference is actually for the second game, but what about you guys? Do you prefer this one or?
Well, we were kind of playfully arguing about it earlier. So as a kid, I really didn't play the second or third ones at all. So all of my like nostalgic memories from my childhood are from the first game. So I feel like I'm just like biased. Like I'm just love the first game. I don't know.
And that's perfectly valid for preference. I mean, like that's one that you played. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it was I think the most like meteorically successful game that Nintendo released of the series. It just like blew everybody away, and I think at the time in 1994 it was just like an incredible game to have. And I do think that the sequels are amazing and they add a lot to the games, like especially the ability to kind of like float or fly or whatever. Like that was really cool, but I just never played that as a kid, so I don't know. I mean, I wish that I did. I probably would have a different opinion, but I don't know. I really, really love the first one. It's definitely like a highlight.
Well, you're talking like success of the first game. That's why it's kind of like the poll results aren't too surprising. Donkey Kong Country, the first one, was the third best-selling game on the Super Nintendo, behind Super Mario All-Stars and Super Mario World. So tons of people played this game. So it would make sense that that's the preferred one. But what about you, Steven? Which is your preferred?
No, I just want to say I love all three of these games. Like whenever Donkey Kong Country comes up, not equally, but this is like literally a top 5 favorite series for me ever.
Oh, yeah.
Like I just adore all three of these games so much, and I played them all to death as a kid. But no, I go number 2. Diddy's Conquest is my favorite. I love Donkey Kong Country 1 for its simplicity. It's kind of like pick up and play. There's not anything you really have to do in the game. Yeah. But I thought, like you said, 2 is just much more refined. I actually think it has a better soundtrack.
Ooh, that's controversial, and we'll get into that.
That is controversial. I probably shouldn't lead into that statement.
It's all good. I know somebody had a heart attack listening to that. Like, the first game soundtrack. Anyways, go ahead.
But 2, I was just playing 2 again, and it just like sucked me right in, and I was like, oh my god, this game is just so perfect. The controls seem a little tighter to me. I don't know if I'm imagining that or not. I love the environment. The environments are darker. It's kind of got like a more like serious tone than the first one. The animations are still amazing, but mostly it's the level design. It's just like everything in 2, like the save points are easier to get. The boss fights are more creative. I thought the levels had more secrets that mattered, like finding the DK coins was a lot of fun, and finding the coins to get to the secret world. Like there's a lot of depth there that was kind of missing in the first game. To me, it felt like the first game's secrets were there, but they didn't really matter. Yeah. There's nothing you could really get from them, but 2, it's just like it's literally an improvement in every way over 1. Yeah. In terms of like how it kind of plays out.
And that's what you would kind of hope from a sequel. Certainly that it would take all the good from the first game and kind of build on it. So like one negative, maybe the only negative that we mentioned so far was DK's ground pound. There's not really anything like that in the second game. That's kind of just like it's a feature, but nobody really uses it. Diddy and Dixie Kong both have sort of their rolling movement. You got the cartwheel, right? He still has a cartwheel. And then
I think so.
Yeah, and then Dixie has like a hair whip move where she can, plow through enemies. And then you've got sort of the hovering move that Dixie Kong can do, which made Dixie Kong my preferred character. I was like, I will take a hover any day.
Yeah, it's awesome. But they did a good job because that game has like different character barrels. There's like certain parts you have to use Diddy Kong. Yeah. And they also have like the throwing mechanic where you can pick up the other Kong and toss them to get to extra areas, which I thought was really clever.
Yes, that was not in the first game. That's right.
No, you can't throw in the first game.
Oh, okay. So that's a good mechanic right there. But yeah, a lot of the preferences that I saw online, which kind of just surprised me that DKC won, was, for example, Jeff Man 1490 on Twitter said 2, then 1, then 3. That's my order of preference. I didn't meet anyone who kind of came out of the shadows and was like, "Oh, 3 is my favorite of the trilogy," but I'm sure they're out there. So, enjoy. What was it just Baby Kong? Was the name of the other?
Kitty Kong, I think is his name.
Kitty Kong.
Worst Kong.
The worst Kong. In order of Kongs, he was the bottom Kong. Speaking of quality Kongs, I guess that's a weird segue, but I wanted to talk briefly about character design between the original Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Country's Donkey Kong. I drew a little cartoon because that's what I enjoy doing. But you could kind of see the first arcade kind of Donkey Kong. Like, how would you describe that guy? I would say
he looks like a classic villain from like the 1940s cartoon.
And he was, right? I mean, like Donkey Kong historically is a Mario villain, right? He kidnapped Daisy and Jumpman had to go and rescue him. But he just kind of looks like...
Was that Mario's name, Jumpman?
That was originally. He was Jumpman before he was Mario, which, yeah, good job changing that name. Could you imagine Super Jumpman World would be such a stupid name. So change
Jumpman RPG. That sounds awesome.
Super Jumpman Galaxy. Yeah, it's great that they changed the name.
Super Jumpman Sunshine.
Super Jumpman Odyssey. We could get through this all day. But yeah, Donkey Kong, original Donkey Kong. Looked kind of dopey, kind of stupid, kind of dim-witted. Especially his in-game sprite where he's just kind of like, pounding his chest and that dumb grimace on his face. He looks like he has like no personality, essentially.
I have a question. Do you guys think maybe that was inspired by King Kong? Because that's kind of what it reminds me of a little bit. And that'd be like the classic ape in movies before.
Oh yeah,
Donkey Kong.
I would say,
around.
especially with kidnapping the girl, and like that's definitely a King Kong motif. But what I'd heard is that Shigeru Miyamoto came up with the name Donkey Kong because he merely thought it sounded silly, which I guess is a good reason for a game's name. But yeah, so then getting to Donkey Kong Country, I think it's such a great jump from the arcade version of the character to modernize him then in the 90s. It kind of gave him much more personality. You could see him smiling and showing his teeth. His beady eyes kind of gave him a little more sense of there being a mind behind that, that face. I'm probably overthinking this, but the one thing that I think was really good is the necktie. I don't think that Donkey Kong Country was the first time they used the tie. But I'm not sure on that now. Oh gosh. Do you guys know?
I think I was reading earlier about it, and I think there was a game for the Game Boy that came out that had it for the first time.
Oh, yes.
Man,
You're thinking of it was just called Donkey Kong on the Game Boy. It shows the old design for Donkey Kong. He's carrying what looks like Pauline from Mario Odyssey over his shoulder, and he's got the red necktie with his initials on it, so he doesn't forget his name.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was also reading. It's kind of interesting, but apparently the redesign was it was a bit of a struggle because I guess Shigeru Miyamoto really didn't want to go with the modern. He wanted more of like the arcade. Like he wanted something more intermediate than what Rare was like kind of like pushing.
Which is understandable. I mean, you create a character, you're like, yeah, but this is my design, though, and it kind of becomes your baby. But I'm glad he let that one go because comparison wise, I think the new design for Donkey Kong is much better than the original design.
It's very 90s too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, like it's I don't know. It's just a cool character.
Well, and I read too that they tried to design him after like real gorillas. I think that's my doorbell, you guys. I am very sorry. That never happens.
Okay, man.
I live in like a tiny town. I will be right back.
Poor Donkey Kong Country 3, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about it, but I think it kind of came out at a bad time too because everyone was thinking about the N64 at that point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a few games like that. Like Kirby's Dream Land 3 came out in 1997. That's like the same time Final Fantasy 7 was coming out on the PlayStation, and like I mean, that's like not a great time to release a major title, 2 years after your system's basically kind of been the last generation.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think generally like games that come between generations, if they don't come out for like multi-platforms, which is kind of seemingly like the trend now, is to make games that work for like multiple platforms if they're like kind of towards the end. Like Zelda seems to do that now. Yeah,
the Nintendo always does that with Zelda because it always gets released right at the end and beginning of a cycle, it seems.
Yeah.
Or they just remaster
it's like a smart. It's a smart move though.
Yeah, I think like The Last of Us, like Sony was pretty smart. They knew that was like a swan song game for the PS3, so they just brought it right to the PS4.
Yeah, dude, I wonder if the new Last of Us will be like PS4, PS5.
No idea, man. I don't even think that game has a time frame to come out yet. Some people say 2019, some say 2020.
I think it might be the last hoorah of the PS4. Like, if it comes out at all. Yeah.
If it comes out at all. It's not Final Fantasy 7.
Okay, it'll come out, but it might be for the PS5 is the thing.
I could see that, it being like a title on the PS5.
I don't know.
So what you guys been talking about? Last of Us 2?
Well, we're just talking about how like Donkey Kong Country 3 was killed because it was towards the end of the SNES life cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
Like I remember when it came out and we were like, oh, they're still making these? Yeah. So, yeah. It's not like, because you think about it, it's not like with the NES. The NES had a fairly late like shelf life on into the 16-bit age. But you had a game like Kirby's Adventure that came out super late. And you're like, this is like a really high-end NES game. But then the difference between 8 and 16-bit is much smaller than the difference between 16-bit and early 3D.
Yeah.
Like those two things are dramatically different. Like you would play Donkey Kong Country and then you'd play Metal Gear Solid, and those games are dramatically different. Hugely different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, I think I was talking about gorillas.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you were talking about
Yes.
Gorilla.
Okay. So with Donkey Kong, I read that they tried to design him and his movements after real gorillas. I kind of get this like image of like the animators and developers going to like a zoo and like sketching how gorillas move and stuff like that. Eventually they realized that like it's too slow. And gorillas don't really do much of anything. They just kind of sit around and eat. So it's weird, but when you realize this, but you play Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong kind of runs like a horse more than a gorilla. So it's another really interesting thing about this new redesign where he's this weird amalgamation of like human behaviors and gorilla appearance, but he's running like, a different kind of like equestrian animal at all. So it's a great design in my opinion.
I think it's one thing we didn't really touch upon much that's absolutely amazing in Donkey Kong Country that's completely lacking in any of the other series at the time is the animation. Just like the character redesign, but also just like the animation in the game, It's something that I think as a kid I definitely noticed because there's points where you put down your Super Nintendo controller and you're right next to a ledge. And if you put Donkey Kong right next to a ledge, like on the edge of it, his eyes will actually bulge out of his head and he'll kind of like wave his arms like he's kind of losing his balance. And a little stuff like that is just all through the game. There's so many cool animations. Like when my favorite one, I think, is when you go to one of the bonus rooms, and if you lose with Diddy Kong, he like tosses his hat on the floor and starts like stomping on it like a petulant child or something. It's just great. It's absolutely great.
That's personality again, and that this game has tons of stuff like that, and they definitely continue that on into the future series. But you remember sort of the pre-title screen where you have Cranky Kong, this old shriveled up Kong, my favorite of the Kongs actually, who's the original Donkey Kong, which is even cooler. And he's like playing his like Victrola or whatever with like a vinyl record. And then Donkey Kong comes in and like throws down like a barrel and it explodes or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Yep. So it's this sense of like quasi irreverence, but like 90s coolness, like hyper coolness, and I think that bleeds nicely, not just into the personality of the animations, but it bleeds nicely into the music of the game. Certainly Donkey Kong Country is known for its music. Now you mentioned, Steven, earlier that you prefer the second game soundtrack. Okay, and that's controversial. We'll dig into that a little here. And Toby, I'm guessing you prefer the first game soundtrack since that's the one that you played.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I prefer the second one for Sticker Brush Symphony, which is like one of the most beautiful pieces that I've ever heard in video game music. But the first game has a lot of great music. My favorite, and this one obviously has to be mentioned, is Aquatic Ambiance. It's such a peaceful, beautiful, echoing, haunting bit of music. But what are some other like highlights for the music that you'd say in this game? Because it's very ambient compared to the rest of the series.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just having a lot of atmospheric music is really cool. Like it has some music that sounds more atmospheric, and other music that sounds like it has like a really strong melody. Like that tune when you jump into the save barrels. I don't like the or like the
I can't recall.
I can't recall. But like also like
Can you hum it?
oh no, but like also the tune when you're in the what is it, the thing, the little plane that like flies you around to the different levels.
Oh,
I don't know.
Funky
Do you remember
Kong's.
Funky Kong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, like you have these really strong melodies, and it doesn't sound as atmospheric. So I don't know. It's really cool. David Wise did an amazing job, and I was reading about it, and apparently he thought that his music was totally just going to get replaced when Nintendo listened to it, because like they're like, oh, this is a really important game, like we don't know if we can go with this because it's totally different, so we'll just go with like a Japanese composer. But they kept like his stuff, so it's pretty awesome.
And good on them because, yeah. Well, you think in terms of the Nintendo canon, you've got Metroid that sounds really spooky and haunting and dark. And then you've got Mario that's very cheerful, oftentimes influenced by, like reggae beats and rhythms and ragtime and things like that. Then you've got The Legend of Zelda that sounds very adventurous and sort of stereotypically high fantasy. But then you've got this game, and capturing a sound for this game that's very percussive and fun, but not in the same way as Super Mario, with different musical influences, I think was a brilliant thing to do. I remember the first time I heard, I think it's called the DK Island Swing. If it's that you're like, oh dude, I love this game.
Yeah. You can't not love it.
No, I mean that's such a fun, like whimsical piece of music,
Yeah.
It almost sounds like somebody saying banana over and over again. Which you remember, this is such a stupid thing, but you remember back in the day when they had synthetic voices, right, in games? It'd be like, and you're like, well, I don't know what it said, but that's cool. My game's talking to me. I thought that song was somebody saying banana over and over again, which made it all that more endearing to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was not the brightest banana in the bunch, but
No pun intended there.
no pun intended. But yeah, any more comments on the music?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, again, I mean, it's another, like, there's so much attention to detail in this game, and I think the music is such a reflection of that. Like, when you go into the mini games, it has that really fun music, that kind of like carnival-esque, kind of like African beats, like rhythm stuff going on. But yeah, the atmosphere in this game, I forgot how atmospheric the soundtrack was until I was replaying it. But there's so many songs in the game that aren't even really like that melodic. You kind of just have like noises and like ambient sounds. And my favorite one, this, as a kid, we used to hum this all the time. The cave music, like when you go in the caves, like the platforms. I don't know how to describe these levels other than calling them caves. But the caves have the best music in the game, despite being some of my least favorite levels in the game.
Yeah.
And it's kind of,
I like some of like the forest music. Was really cool, and it's interesting how organic this soundtrack sounds, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's being played on wooden drums and wooden sticks and things like that, with odd percussive noises kind of echoing in the background. And
even those snow levels, when the blizzard starts coming and it has those creepy kind of like synth notes that come in, I was like, wow, this is like exactly. It's I'm kind of freaked out, starting to like really snow down. And I get these creepy like piano noises. They do kind of. They make you feel a sense of sort of isolation in your environments, and sort of the feeling of like, yeah, you're in a beautiful world. There's a lot to look at, and it's really like kind of dazzling, but it's also a bit dangerous and foreboding at the same time. And that David Wise, he just captures it so well. And I mean, like, I love that there's just so many different facets of the soundtrack. You got the fun, like, African stuff. You got the atmospheric stuff. And they play the songs enough times where they'll get stuck in your head. Even the atmospheric stuff, like the water music.
Yeah.
So, yeah, amazing
definitely.
soundtrack.
It's really subtle kind of how some of this music affects you. The real atmospheric stuff sounds borderline sound effect more than a soundtrack. But that really gives you a sense of like the foreboding quality of a level, or the sense of the impending snow, or in the minecart levels. It's like, I've heard that music in my nightmares before. It's like some spooky music. All right, so this is from Fritzstalgia on Twitter. Is there an identifiable increment in game design through the series in the Super Nintendo era? How does DKC stand out with its following entries? Is it the characters or the novelty? So why, I guess, to sort of to crystallize all that, why do you guys think that people prefer the first game? Beyond, let's say, Toby and your nostalgia for it, specifically because you played it the majority of the time. What's something that you would say people would prefer the first game for over its sequels?
I guess I can start that off. I think it's the simplicity of the original Donkey Kong Country. The levels are huge and there's secrets everywhere, but it's very much it sort of straddles between like the arcadiness of Sonic and like the depth of Mario. And I think that like when you play Donkey Kong Country, the original, there's no real stress in finding the secrets. You just kind of pick it up, you play it, you have fun. And whereas I think the second and the third game, there's a lot more pressure to explore and find the secrets, and you really have to get more immersed in the game. So I think the simplicity of Donkey Kong Country it just wins you over, and it's much more pick up and play.
Yeah, no, that's true. And something that popped in my head while you were talking about the simplicity was this game does not have a timer. You can sort of take things at your leisure. You can backtrack. You can do all sorts of different things to explore. But it has a kind of simple, leisurely pace to it. Even though you can play it at a high-speed pace, you can also sort of take your time as well, right? What about you, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely kind of agree with what you guys are saying about kind of like the simplicity of the first one. I think that's kind of like, as a kid, like I think I rented the second one or something like that, because I definitely played it. And yeah, like just the second one is just much more complicated. Like the floating or technique or whatever, like all the moves seem a little bit more have a lot more going on. And I feel like the first one just captured a more of like a simple platforming experience maybe. And just, just the fact that it was such an incredible experience at the time really added a lot to it. I don't know. I think that's generally kind of where I'm coming from that with that.
Okay. Couple of these were pretty much things that we covered, so I'll just give these shout outs to these folks. This is from Chris BG99. He said, personally, I think the graphics hold up a lot better than people say. I'd agree with that for the most part. And I know you guys did too. It was something we touched on. This is from PlayJack Sayback on Twitter. How did they get the character graphics and animations to look so smooth? None of us are developers, right? You guys aren't developers. All right. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know technically how they did it, but they did it. And they did it well.
Yeah. I mean, and that's... Yeah, but I mean, that's like a really interesting part of Donkey Kong Country, because they purchased the Silicon Graphics workstations, and I think they took a huge risk when they did it. I think like one of the workstations was like $90,000 or something like that. Like they put a lot of their money, like their success from like the NES era, into like buying these things. So they totally took a risk to like make this game and like woo Nintendo with it. So I think that's really awesome, and it's a huge part of what makes the game so awesome. Just these computer graphic rendered images and everything, and also just kind of like the way that they were able to take these high quality rendered images and integrate them into such a limited cartridge space for like the SNES. Like that is just really hard. And I think like we made an episode on Rare, and we like researched Rare a lot, and when you start like looking into like Tim and Chris Stamper, like the two dudes behind Rare, like you realize that their work ethic and like willingness to just like spend so much time on their games and just like to make like really high quality games that like other developers just weren't making at the time. Like you really realize that like it's a really special game, and like it's definitely a lot of it has to do with Rare as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it paid off though.
Yeah.
They sold, this number here says 9,300,000 units sold. Like this is 94. That's a lot of titles.
Yeah.
So they definitely made back their investment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, they definitely did. They knew what they were doing on that one.
Yeah. Here's a question from Buck Chuck Gaming on Twitter that I don't know how to answer. He said, "Have you guys tried the Cranky Kong Run?" Do you know what that is?
I don't even know what that would be, honestly.
Really? Oh no. What about you, Toby?
The
You know
Cranky
what that
Kong.
is?
I wish I knew what that was, but I don't know.
Is this in the original
All
Donkey
right.
Kong Country?
He didn't provide any other.
Cranky Kong Run it.
Because you can
It
use
might be like a
maybe.
fan hack.
you could use Cranky Kong in the newest game in Tropical Freeze, but that's the only game, as far as I know, where he's playable.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it wasn't playable. After you beat the game. Okay. So this is for Donkey Kong Country. This is from GameFAQs. After you beat the game, Cranky Kong says he beat the entire game in less than 1 hour and in only one life. What happens if I do this? I've beaten the game in 45 minutes, but never with one life. Okay, so that I guess would be the Cranky Kong Run. Have you guys like timed yourselves?
Oh
beating
my
this
god,
game?
no! I definitely never beat it anywhere near that
I
quickly.
mean, the game will actually take time for you. It'll tell you how long you played. But no, I don't think I could beat it in under an hour, especially not with one life. There's almost zero chance.
Yeah, like you gotta be a master. Well, I mean, he's Cranky Kong, the original DK. That's why he gets paid the big bucks.
Got good moves
You
for an
know?
old Kong.
Yeah, that's why he's my favorite Kong right there. All right. So this is from Cecil_234, who said the second game improved over the first with its save feature, had better levels and music. We touched on that. Somebody else, Bitland Comic, said the sequels missed the mark for them. And somebody, TGF Stream, agreed with that. The first one was revolutionary and totally different. Both others were just the same but less. So that kind of bridges into the comparisons between the sequels. Don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty of that, and I think we addressed a lot of the differences between the sequels. But when I think about this game and Donkey Kong Country 2, it's the soundtrack. That's the clincher for me. Cardiac Drop on Twitter called the soundtrack mega sexy excellence, which I would agree with. It's a very, very pithy turn of phrase, but the second one is my favorite for the music. Like I said, because of the Sticker Brush Symphony, which is an amazing, just ethereal piece of music. Then you've got that the mine cart. Not the mine cart, but the mine music in the second game.
Yeah, that's my personal favorite. That's my favorite Donkey Kong track ever, as far as the music
Okay,
piece
now
goes.
so this is something that I've done before a couple times on Magecast. Can you sing that mine song? Can you? Are you guys either of you guys musically inclined?
Do 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 do. Do 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 boom.
Yes,
Oh my
that
God.
was beautiful. All right, so that means Toby, he set the precedent. You gotta do.
I don't know.
That's amazing. Yeah. So that mine song from the second game is incredible. Sticker Brush Symphony is really good. The King K. Rool song in the second game is, I think, really brilliant. It has like this sweeping like percussion to it, like that I think is really interesting. But both these games have fairly different kind of soundtracks. I would say the second one's much more melodic, but the first one, for its ambiance, is second to almost none that I can think of. I mean, Super Metroid's up there with its atmospheric soundtrack as well, but I mean, Aquatic Ambiance is a great piece of music.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Okay, here's a hard question for you guys. This is from the Arcade Castle on Twitter. How many bananas?
In the whole game, or
How many bananas? Well, he's searching for the bananas, right? That's the whole point, like the plot. or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes. So the answer is at 0, right? Because he had all his bananas stolen. Like that's the premise of the game, right?
yeah.
Is King K. Rool stole his banana hoard, and he lives on an island. Rather than go picking more bananas, he just has to go and steal back his. Dude, don't you just love the premises of retro games? Like you didn't need like this dramatic story. It was just like, dude stole his bananas.
He's got to get those bananas.
I get those back somehow. Exactly. It is brilliant, and it's enough to set the game by. So Arcade Castle, answer is 0. We already just talked about the soundtracks, but I wanted to give a shout out to Meow Tay Ching on Twitter, who said the DKC soundtrack, popular one with all the hits everybody likes. DKC 2 soundtrack, the technical masterpiece that's appreciated by music nerds, but not as popular. What say you? Yeah, we talked about our preferences. Here's an interesting question. This is from GP Animations on Twitter. Any plans for an official vinyl release of the soundtrack? Do you guys collect video game vinyl?
I don't have the space.
I don't have the space yet.
No,
I
man.
don't. I mean, I would really love to. If I was going to collect anything, it'd probably be vinyl. And I saw like they made a Castlevania 4 vinyl that I really wanted, but I don't collect vinyl.
Yeah, it sounds cool though. I would pick up
You should,
Donkey
yes.
Kong.
Oh, I would too. This is what I got for Christmas.
Oh,
Journey.
nice.
Oh, nice,
Journey
man.
vinyl.
That's a real good one. Oh, I love that
I've
game.
been listening the heck out of it.
Dude, I love that
but,
game.
So I guess that Donkey Kong Country had a limited release, not an official one, by Moonshake Records, I think it was called. I did a little research into it. And since it was limited, now it's like super hard to find a copy, like $100 on eBay and stuff like that. It's kind of a shame. But I think it would be, they would sell big bucks if Nintendo put out official vinyl releases of their games. I would buy a Super Mario Galaxy vinyl in like a heartbeat. Like that's a game that has a great soundtrack.
Yeah, I would have to pick up like every Zelda soundtrack. Probably Skyward Sword might be number one.
Oh, really? See, I haven't played Skyward Sword.
Yeah,
Good
I
music,
totally
though.
disagree with Skyward Sword.
Oh, what's your favorite Zelda?
Probably Wind Waker.
Okay.
But just for the soundtrack,
mine-
though? Even Wind Waker?
Yeah,
just for-
dude, sound. No, it's got a soundtrack. I love that game.
Oh, dude, the ocean, that da da da.
Yeah, that's
da,
pretty
da, da 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 for like an hour because you're on.
Yeah,
the
pretty much
ocean.
because you're like traveling forever, but you never seem to get there. But I love it.
Oh, Wind Waker is beautiful.
That's a great game.
And my favorite Zelda is Link's Awakening, way back on the Game Boy. So maybe not on vinyl for that one. It's kind of high pitched, but there you are. That is actually it for our audience responses. We got quite a bit through the polls and the questioning. Thank you to everyone who shared some thoughts on this game. But in closing, final question I'd like to ask you guys is, what is at least one similar game that you would recommend, similar to Donkey Kong Country, that you would recommend? Sequels are kind of cheating. So.
Right, yeah, you can't say the Donkey Kong game.
Oh, that's a hard one.
That is a hard question because it's not exactly like any other game I've played. There's similarities, but I guess I'm gonna kind of cheat here. I guess I'd probably pick something like Kirby Superstar, maybe.
Okay.
In the fact that there's kind of like a tag in and out system where you can kind of like pick up new allies as you go, and there's a lot to explore, and there's no timer, and it's definitely a game to be appreciated by kind of like platforming nerds. It's not as easy as some of the other Kirby games. Other than that, I might even say something like Castlevania, maybe something like Castlevania 4. It's another game with a lot of exploration involved. It's slower paced, very different kind of game, but it's also, there's some similarities I guess you could draw upon. I think if you like Donkey Kong, you're probably going to be looking for challenging platformers. So a lot of this stuff like Castlevania, I would say Mega Man's quite different, but Castlevania, Kirby, maybe even something like V, the game. I don't know how you say this game, like V V V V V V V V V. Like,
yeah, the 6 Vs game. Yeah,
yeah, like that's
a
another
great game.
If you really want a challenging platformer, that one's pretty hard, but still really fun.
Yeah.
So those are some games I
there's-
might throw in.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of brutal platformers these days.
Absolutely.
Like that's almost a new genre of like you got like Super Meat Boy and like Celeste you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I don't know. So I would go probably with like Sonic Mania or something like that. I don't know. Like there's so many great platformers, but just choose a really good platformer. And I really love Sonic Mania and like any of those kinds of games. Like Celeste is really great, but it's like I would say it's totally different with the difficulty level and everything like that. But yeah, like I don't know. Let's just find some good platformers. There's a lot of them.
Okay, that's fair. This is probably not the best game to mention. Do you guys remember on the NES a game called Mick Kids? MC Kids?
I don't think I
It was
ever
a
played
McDonald's
that.
game. No.
McDonald's game.
I don't think I ever played this game.
Okay, let me share screen for a second.
Oh my god.
See if I can- This is, ladies and gentlemen, or just gentlemen, Mick Kids. It is a very tightly
God.
knit 2-player style platformer where you played as these 2 kids exploring magical realms in McDonald's land. If you have not played it, it is not a masterpiece, so don't worry. But it's worth playing for the LOLs sometime. Yeah.
It is.
I don't know why I thought of this game. So definitely not in terms of quality is it at all similar, but I just thought of it in terms of like the co-op platformer value. The next time you guys meet in wherever it is that you guys meet and hang out, I know you're in 2 different places right now, but y'all should play some Mick Kids and have a blast just laughing at it. 'Cause it's an abomination.
Oh my god. All right, dude.
So anyway, the last thing is I just wanted to ask, where can we find you guys? Where can we find your podcast?
Okay, I'll do this one. All right, we are the Pixel Meditations. That's the name of our podcast, the Pixel Meditations. You can find us on Twitter, the Pixel Meditations, with no S actually on Twitter. So it's the Pixel Meditation, just Pixel Meditation. You can also contact us, thepixelmeditations@gmail.com, or you can just find us on our Podbean page, which is just type in Google Pixel Meditations. It'll bring you right to the Podbean page. And yeah, we got about 19 episodes. We just did a rare episode a few weeks back. So yeah, we're kind of a fledgling podcast, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. So come check us out if you kind of liked what you heard tonight.
Yes, and oh man, I need to listen to that rare episode because now I'm like in rare mode from this Donkey Kong Country talk.
Yeah. We really enjoyed making the episode. Like, there's so many facts and like things to cover, like the different eras of Rare, and like it was really cool to just like kind of go through all of it.
You guys have some other favorite Rare games?
Yeah, I would say.
Banjo-Kazooie.
Banjo-Kazooie, I've never played it.
Really?
I was
Okay.
thinking Killer Instinct is another one of my favorites.
Yeah. Also,
me-
just okay, Steven.
Let's say Diddy Kong Racing. I love Diddy Kong Racing.
yeah,
I
Diddy
think it's
Kong Racing.
absolutely phenomenal, and I would love to see a remake or a sequel or something, but I'm not sure if it'll ever happen.
Yeah, is Rare still around?
Just owned by Microsoft. So I mean, I think they.
Yeah, then no.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of make games, but I mean, they came out with the what is this pirate game for the Xbox called? Xbox One.
Oh, Sea of
Thieves. Yeah, Sea of Thieves.
Okay.
Which neither of us have played. But I mean, they're still making games, but it's just definitely not the same. Like those 2 brothers that I mentioned, Chris and Tim Stamper, have left Rare, so it's just a different company, I think now.
But you can go to Playtonic. Some of the members from the old Rare formed Playtonic, and they made the game Ukulele. So I didn't play Ukulele. It looked okay,
Yeah,
but I'm,
it's not the best.
have a lot of. He's got words for ukulele. Well, too bad we don't have a time machine, fellas, and we could just go back and capture David Wise and capture the brothers and 90s Rare and get them to make more games.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome. You know, publish on Steam, whatever. Just that would be cool. But thank you guys, Steve and Toby, for joining us today. I had a heck of a fun time chatting with you.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
yeah, thanks a lot.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of MageCast as much as I did. If so, please follow, subscribe, share, and leave us a review to help us reach a wider audience. If you enjoy our work, please consider supporting us and our vision for the future of gaming conversations through patreon.com/The Well-Read Mage. Special thanks to my Magely colleague, Brent Mead, for sound editing. The MageCast theme song, Post Atmosphere, was composed by fellow mage Russell Gordon and can be found on his YouTube and SoundCloud. This episode may be over, but the legend will live on, passed down by the dwarves, the elves, and the dragons.